Hi folks, Toad here with Visordown.com, and today I want to talk to you about Harley-Davidson's 2021 Low Rider S. So as you can see, I am perched here outside of my shed. I was going to go somewhere more exotic to film this, maybe Brinklow, but as the weather in the UK at the minute doesn't seem to know whether it's going to snow, hail or tornado, I thought I'd do it here, and then if it pisses it down I can go in there and stay dry. Although actually on that last note, tornado, that could be quite appropriate, because if you're chasing tornadoes in the lower states of America, you would want something that wasn't going to get blown away. And at 305 kilograms claimed wet weight, this thing's going nowhere. But enough of the frivolities. Let's have a look at the bike. So this is £16,995 in Euro 5 trim. It's a bit, I think it's gone up slightly since its launch. It is available in two colour schemes. So there is the vivid black colour scheme, which you're probably looking at on your screen now. And then there is this one, Midnight Crimson, which is the bike that we've got in front of us here, and it is festooned with these lovely retro Harley-Davidson graphics on the tank, and I think it looks like a really nice bike. The paint on it is luxurious. In fact, it looks like it's still wet, and it's got like a slight tint of metallic going on in there. Harley described this, and this is going from their own press bump, as a blacked out factory custom performance cruiser. I mean, it is really a classic West Coast cruiser. You've got the mid-set pegs, you've got a small sort of fly screen in the headlight cowl, and you've got kind of the upright riding position from the kind of the handlebars there. I don't think it's a true performance cruiser, but out of the Harley range, it might stand out as having more performance than some of the other cruisers that they sell. I mean, the biggest thing to talk about with any Harley really is the engine. It is 75% of the bike really. So here we've got the Milwaukee-Eight 114 cubic inch engine, which equates to 1868 cc. Says it down there on the frame if you can't do the old imperial measurements. So it's pushing out 114 pound-foot of torque. And we've got about 93 brake horsepower, so it is quite perky. I mean, there was a time when Harleys of this style, you know, they would create a sort of a bit of an asthmatic 70 bhp and not really pull the skin off a rice pudding. But this is a very peppy engine. I mean, this is in standard, and this sort of frustrates me about Harley-Davidson in the UK. All the bikes that they give to us press, they are all standard Euro spec, Euro homologation regulations. None of them have had anything to do with them. And if you've ever owned a Harley, or you know anyone who has, you will know that the first thing that happens to any Harley when it gets bought is it gets a stage 1 kit thrown at it, which comprises of a change to the air filter, a remap to the exhaust system, and a new exhaust. That's the smallest modification that everybody does, and the simple reason is it makes your Harley sound and feel like a Harley-Davidson. It is quick. I mean, don't get me wrong, 100 horsepower, even in something that weighs over 300 kgs, even if it's just a tiny amount, it's still a lot of power, and it does get down the road really, really quickly. But the kind of all the action happens in quite a small window, so you get above sort of 3,500 RPM, and then all of a sudden the engine comes alive, and then it whizzes up to the red line of about 4,500, 5,000 RPM. So you've got to get used to riding in that very small window of opportunity. But once you get your head around that, you can make progress, and overtakes are obviously not a problem, because you've got all the torque that you'd ever want to get round whatever it is that's in front of you. And 9 times out of 10 you're going to be doing that without dropping any cogs. So on that front, it is quite rewarding to ride, and it's got that Harley-Davidson character. It's just a shame that it is so sort of tied back by those Euro 5 regulations that don't quite make it sound and feel like a Harley-Davidson really should. While we're talking about the engine, got to talk about the gearbox on this thing. It is a typical big bore Harley-Davidson gearbox, in that you've got a long throw on the lever, and when you engage the next gear, there is an absolutely mahoosive thwack of the cogs engaging. You will know about it, and so will everybody else on the A447. Clutch is light, it's quite a long throw on the clutch as well, but it's rewarding changing gear on it. You can clutch the shift, although it is better to modulate the sort of the gear changes with the clutch. You get much smoother progress if you do that. For a few years now, Harley-Davidsons have got better and better at the things that people used to say that they didn't do very well. So on that front, I am predominantly talking about the suspension, the brakes and the handling. They're not completely there in terms of Would they rival a European performance cruiser, a Triumph Rocket 3 or a Ducati Diavel, for instance? No, but they are miles better than they used to be. It does corner and handle actually surprisingly well. Ground clearance is an issue, as it is with any Harley-Davidson cruiser with low set pegs. I mean, I have taken fairly hefty chunks out of these footrests, ever so sorry Harley-Davidson and whoever's going to have to replace those when it goes back. But it is a really rewarding thing to ride, and there is a kind of a pleasure and a sort of like a glee that you get when you're hammering down a country lane on something that is this long, this low and this heavy, and making progress in a way that really sort of defies belief. The braking system, the real thing that holds it back is the ABS. The ABS is a bit antiquated. It feels like an ABS system from around about 5 or 10 years ago. It doesn't create a very reassuring lever feel. When the ABS cuts in, you lose all the pressure out of the lever, it goes back to the handlebar. But then again, if you are riding a bike like this and you are having to rely on the brakes so much that the ABS is cutting in, especially on a day like today, you are really riding it wrongly. The engine braking is phenomenally strong, to the point that knocking it down into first gear from about 30 miles an hour will result in chirps from the rear wheel. So if you're having to rely on the brakes that much, you shouldn't be. You should be relying on the gears and using that engine braking to slow you down. Got to talk about the comfort, because it is a cruiser. It's not designed to go massive distances. I think I'm getting to about 150 miles before I start to get a sweaty forehead and I'm looking for a petrol station. And that said, I have had some fairly long days in the saddle on it, and it's really comfy for your backside. The seat is the plushest seat that I've ever sat on. It is just super soft. It's got tons and tons of padding, but because of the kind of the style of the bike and the way that you sat, you do kind of have the aerodynamic drag coefficients of an octopus on a washing line, in that you've got your arms outstretched in front of you, you've got your feet sort of in line with your body, and you've got your bum as the furthest thing back on the bike, so you are kind of just a big parachute on the bike. It's okay for a while if you're just cruising along at sort of 50-60 miles an hour. It's absolutely fine, not a problem at all. Who invited you? But I did spend about an hour and a half on the motorway on this thing, getting over to Donington for another bike launch the other week, and it did get rather tiresome, to the point that I couldn't cruise at 80. I had to drop it down to about sort of 70-75. The sort of headlight cowl on the front with the sort of fly screen over the top of it, it works to a point, but like I said, when you get on the motorway, for my height, the top of my head is just in the bubble of sort of turbulent air, to the point where if I stoop a little bit, my head will be sort of inside the bubble, but it gets really uncomfortable after a while. You're either going to have to be shorter than me or taller than me, and then you're going to be either in the bubble or in clear air above it, and it won't be so much of a problem. So what do we like about the Low Rider S? The handling has really surprised me. I've ridden a lot of modern Harley-Davidsons, and they keep getting better and better, every single one that I ride. The last Harley that I rode that I thought really handled really well was the Fat Bob, the latest generation Fat Bob. This is much sharper, it turns faster, it's got these different sort of profile tyres on it, it's not so fat at the front, and it's slightly slimmer at the rear as well. It just seems to get into corners and stay there and be much more sure-footed on a twisty B road, which is where I kind of think these bikes in the UK are most at home. The styling of it I really like, and especially as a point of note is this paint finish on the crimson red one. I don't know what the black one looks like in the flesh, I've not seen it, but having seen this one with that kind of just real light metallic sort of feel to the paint, I think it's an absolute winner. I love the retro graphics, they kind of remind me of the Stranger Things logo at the beginning of a Stranger Things episode as well, which is quite cool. I also like the way that as a single seat bike, you've got no pillion seat, you've got no pillion footrest. It is just an unashamedly self-centered and selfish motorcycle, which is really cool. I mean, if you've just dropped your lump sum on your pension and your other half's nagging you to go and buy a sports car, go and get yourself one of these, because it will make you a lot happier. What don't we like about the Low Rider S? I mentioned it earlier, the ABS feels a bit antiquated. I think there's things that could be done there to update that and just make it a more modern feeling system. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there is. So yeah, the engine in Euro 5 trim, it just feels like it's being sort of choked by the emissions regulations. like I say, it's not an issue, because the first thing that anyone does when they buy a Harley Davidson is they give it a stage 1 tune, and then it looks, feels and sounds and goes like a proper Harley Davidson should. The other thing that is a bit of an issue is the buffeting around my head. Anything over 70 miles an hour just becomes tiresome on the motorway. So while Harley described this bike as a performance cruiser, in my mind it might not be a performance cruiser to rival the likes of Ducati with the Diavel and Triumph with the Rocket 3, but it is probably the best performance cruiser from Harley Davidson. And if you want a V-twin cruiser that's got performance potential in terms of the handling at least, and you want that American made flavour, there really isn't anywhere else that you can go. A lot of V-twin cruisers can talk the talk but not walk the walk, and the Low Rider S can walk the walk. It can do both, just up to a point. You have to understand its limitations. It might just be the exception to that rule. So there are a lot of people out there who ride nakeds and sports bikes and what we'll call normal motorcycles, and they look at cruisers like this and any V-twin cruiser with less than 100 horsepower, and they kind of think, well, what's the point? I think for me, you really have to ride a Harley, and you have to put into it what you want to get out of it. It's not a bike that is just kind of flatty or riding and just make you feel that way that you would if you're riding 1000cc naked. It takes work and you have to put effort into it, and they are physical bikes to ride. You've really got to put yourself in the hot seat, and you can do that at the minute. Harley have got these on the demos at the dealerships up and down the country. So there we go, that's our review of the Low Rider S after a couple of weeks of spinning around the UK countryside on it. Please let us know what you think in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and the notification bell so that you can stay up to date with all of Visordown's latest videos. Thanks for watching, folks.